All right. We have everyone in from the waiting room?
We do.
Okay, great, perfect. Well, welcome, welcome. This is actually our last webinar in our series of finishing up last school year's webinar series. We're just a little bit late, but better late than never. We're so glad that you're able to join us today. I know there's a lot going on with some schools starting, lots of professional development going on. So you may have noticed that Meredith is recording this webinar today so that either if you have to leave early or you have some colleagues who are not able to join today, you'll be able to share that recording. And so folks won't miss out on today's conversation. So just so you know, we are being recorded today. And the topic for today is our last guidance document on engaging key stakeholders. And it kind of worked out nicely. Actually, I think that this turned out to be sort of almost the first webinar in a new school year because of the importance of stakeholders in really everything we do, right? In all of our positions as district leaders, school leaders, and so forth. So what I'm going to do quickly here is share my screen to show you the document. It was just released today. So I know normally we have it released about a week ahead of time so that folks can check it out and then join the webinar. But this is just how it worked out today. So here is the document. Thumbs up if you can see the document. Excellent. All right. So like I mentioned, this is engaging key stakeholders. And so just like all of our other guidance documents, we start off with our purpose. And really, this is just bringing us all together to remember that stakeholder engagement is important, but it's not just that we're engaging the stakeholders, right? First of all, we got to know who are those stakeholders. But second of all, that engagement has to be meaningful. It can't just be, you know, checking boxes of we reached out to so-and-so, we reached out to so-and-so, but what's going on after those reach outs, right? And where is that going? Where are those conversations going? We have to be intentional about not only reaching out, but following up and keeping those lines of communication open. So this purpose just sort of reviews that a bit. We're calling out, you know, we're not only talking about stakeholders within our districts and school systems, we're also talking about people like parents and guardians of children. We're talking about other taxpayers who may not even have children in the school system, but certainly we know the schooling of children impacts community as a whole, and that includes taxpayers and business owners as well. So this is our purpose. And you probably have seen this graphic before on the right, but it just really sort of sums up, you know, everything that we're talking about today as far as stakeholders, that it comes right down, you know, it boils right down to the kids, right? The children, the students, they're there in the center, and then looking at, well, what all are we surrounding them with, right? We've got our teachers, our school leaders, system leaders, but then we've got everybody around that too. All of those different levels are people and organizations that we would consider stakeholders that we're wanting to make sure we stay connected with. Specifically now, when we look down here, this table on the left is a really good way to just sort of lay out all the different stakeholders we're talking about. And you may, you know, most of these, but it's a nice reminder, oh yeah, I haven't checked in with my school board lately or something like that, right? So it's a nice little reference, not only who are the different groups of stakeholders, but also sort of what connection they have to what's going on in your school or your school district. Specifically then sort of looking on the right, when we think about the impact that stakeholders have on systems change, I know that's been a big focus for a while now, really, in Louisiana, and thinking about how to make improvements for all students, but specifically we're always looking at students with disabilities as well. A lot of that comes down to systems change, and a lot of that then is supported by stakeholders. And so we're sort of referencing this a bit here, and the connection between stakeholders and the systems change we're looking for. And then we get down into some specific information about legislative updates that sort of get to a specific part of stakeholder engagement when we're looking at the Special Education Advisory Councils, or SEECs. So there's a link here to that legislation that was first passed in 2019, but then there's been an update, which is linked here. And then we try to distill the most important information about the SEECs in this table here. And we'll give you all a couple of minutes to check out the guidance document in further detail so you can really dig into these details. But just know that that's here for you about the SEECs. And then this little graphic is just pulling together, again, we're trying to look at what does this mean for these different groups of stakeholders, just another way of looking at it in sort of broader categories. We've got our families, our communities, policymakers, and then other partners. We've got our little conclusion here, and then we'll talk about some of these self-assessment questions here in a little bit, but I would encourage you to, after today, also go back and look at this self-assessment as well. It's some great questions to really get you thinking about, if you feel like you're stuck in a place of how you're engaging with your stakeholders, or the sort of benefits that are coming out of it, or the progress that you're making. Some of these questions might be able to kind of get you thinking in a different way. And finally, we've got our a handful of resources down here. Oops, I think now I'm gonna head away from our document. Anyway, there's some great resources there for you to check out as well. So we wanted to try to have everything in one spot as much as we could. And that is the document in a nutshell. So I think what we'll do right now is I will turn it over to Meredith for the next section of our webinar.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ashley, for that awesome introduction. Very exciting to be releasing this document. I completely agree with you. It's a perfect timing, as I know many of our school systems are engaging with key stakeholders and have been doing so this summer in planning and prepping for what are those key actions they're going to take next year. So we are very excited. We will dive into the document a little bit more. But before we do that, I want to welcome a very special guest for this implementation webinar today. Someone who is a key stakeholder for us here at the department and who meets with and leads many stakeholders in our state relative to our disability community. And that's Ms. Bambi Polizzola. She is the Executive Director for our Governor's Office of Disability Affairs. So leading change, leading many stakeholders in our state around educating stakeholders, addressing current issues, solving, really focused around solving those issues, any and all issues related to our disability community. And so I know that she's a key leader in our state and just hosted our Governor's Office for Disability Affairs conference, and where she engaged a lot of these stakeholders and had a lot of these folks at the table. And so I wanted her to, I was excited to invite her here to kind of speak to you all today around some key indicators for key stakeholder engagement and some things that that have really come to light for her, either out of the conference or in dealing with some of our most recent stakeholder engagement. So Bambi, I'll turn it over to you for a further introduction and to talk through this a little bit with our leaders on the call.
Hi, I got kicked out. I don't want you guys to think that I just left right when I was getting being introduced. So I apologize for any problems that caused. But thank you guys for having me on today to just be able to share a little bit about collaboration. And Meredith, I didn't hear everything that you said about me, so I'm sorry if I duplicate some things, but I'll just give you a little back information. I was a classroom teacher for students with autism for 4 years, and I worked with the LaSword Project, which I see Julie Riley's on. I don't see her face. I would love to see her bright smiling face. Hey Julie. Oh, I see the top of your head. Hey Julie. So I worked with Julie way back, I think 2009 to 2013. And so probably a lot of what I will share with you are things that I've learned with LaSword and the best practices that they include in their program and how they assist with school districts, and have been doing that for over a decade now. And so we had a session in our Governor's Advisory Council on Disability Affairs conference last week, and we had a group of special education directors, some parents, and other stakeholders who participated in those sessions. We had special education directors of Lafourche, Evangeline, Natchitoches. Let's see, where else? Then we had parents from Lafayette, parents from East Baton Rouge. We had an administrator from East Baton Rouge. I think that's it. And they were able to like share some information about how they have implemented the local special education advisory panels and since 2019. And then they talked about some of the ways that they're going to change with the new the way the law has changed in this legislative session. And some of the changes, as is shown in the document that was shared earlier, is just to allow for more flexibility. If you guys remember, there was a very rigid requirement of 50% parents, and that means if you were anywhere above or below 50%, you were out of compliance. So the law changed to at least 50%. So that gives some flexibility. You can have more than 50% of parents. It also requires more transparency, which means like the annual reports that have to be produced each year by the local school districts now have to be posted on websites. So that gives more accessibility and transparency to people to see what's going on. And so we had a discussion, and some of the things that came out of the discussions was talking about recruitment and retention of people to be able to participate, also scheduling the meetings in advance. One of the best practices that came out was talking about having the meeting scheduled for the year. I also talked about allowing some virtual participation, because oftentimes in order to get parents or even your staff from your schools to be able to participate, that's the best way, because we have such limited amount of time. Sometimes they could just maybe take a break and be able to go and log in and be able to hold those meetings in that manner. Also, they talked about developing the meeting agenda. So really putting the work in ahead of time to develop the agenda. The director said, sometimes when they were just trying to develop it, that it was really a struggle, but trying to get that input ahead of time from the members, as well as allowing, on the agenda time for each member of the Special Ed Advisory Council to be able to just share something. And that may lead to discussion that then could lead to maybe some action item. And so when they talked about recruitment, they talked about pushing things out through social media. Districts have, as you guys know, have different ways in which they communicate with families, but to push out that there is a Special Ed Advisory Council and that there's an opportunity for people to apply. So push it out to the website, their social media accounts, and also through community organizations that may engage parents and others, particularly those organizations that engage parents with disabilities is a great way to recruit. Also, really looking at ways to get diversity in the membership of the committee. So, some of our parishes were really big geographically. So having geographic representation also across the grade span, and also representation from different disability types, racial or ethnic diversity is important. One thing that wasn't mentioned by as a practice by anybody who was participating in our conference, but that I thought, and I took this back from the Lessard days, was that there's nothing in the law that says a district can't focus on a particular area. So while you may, you want to try and get diversity, if the district wants to use the SEEK to focus on a specific best practice, that is also an option. So it could be feeder schools that you work on a best practice. That could be a model in your district. It could be that you work on, high school transition And so your SEEK may be made up of people across the district from your high schools and those people who serve students with disabilities in your high school. So just that was another thing that was brought up. So I'm hoping that our districts really think about the special ed advisory councils as a way to really not to be something else that has to be done. That's a requirement, but something that it's a very good use of time to be able to have that engagement and have that communication, and to have members on that the special ed advisory council who are really a part of the community that can go back and share what are the things that are happening in the district. Not, we all know that there's things that could be improved in districts, but it's really good for stakeholders to know that leadership is aware of things and that it's being addressed in a proactive way. And so I think I have shared with you, Meredith, what you were asking, but I also wanted to, if I can share the screen, I have a few bullet points that the Governor's Advisory Council on Disability Affairs has developed, like as just some recommendations on how the Special Ed Advisory Council can be, some of the things that they can do in order to be more effective. And so I don't know if I could share or not.
Yeah. Ashley, will you switch host to Bambi real quick? It looks like Ashley may be frozen.
Okay.
Let me send her a message and see if that works.
I also have a recording of that session. We actually have recordings of all of our sessions for the conference, but that recording of that Special Ed Advisory Council session can be shared. The link is on YouTube. Okay.
I'm pulling it up now, Bambi Forum, and I'll send that out to all the supervisors too, because I watched the recording as well. So I'll take care of that for you right now.
Here are some of the bullet points. So the public posting, we talked about that, about the opportunity to apply for membership. Also establishing an application process and clearly defined term limits. We talked about diversity. Also some things that may be some interesting things to add that will make the council more robust and meaningful is including self-advocates on the council, like high school students. It's a great way for build leadership for our students with disabilities, and also including other people like school board members. And this reminds me of really even before Lessard. I'm a parent of a child with a disability, and I can remember first starting out probably in about 2006 or 7, probably about 15 years ago. In our district, we had an autism team. And that might have been something that was, some of you have been around for a while, you may have had those in your districts, but it included one representative basically from all the different groups that provide services for students with autism. And so we had principals, we had school board members, we had all of the pupil appraisal staff. And so when I think about a school board member right now, the principal who was on that autism team is now a school board member. So I was thinking about that, like she'd be a great member to be on this team because she understands what the purpose of this collaboration and this advisory committee, because I know she did it 15 years ago as a school administrator. Also, another recommendation was including representatives from local nonprofits, which many of the schools that were on our, the representatives that were on our panel for our session had Families Helping Families, said they had Families Helping Families members, our staff as representatives. Also, we had Dr. Jalinda Beckers, who is over the Lines Connected program. She is on Tangipahoa Special Ed Advisory Council, LRS, or other community disability organizations. And there are many disability organizations around the state. You guys who are working in the district probably know those disability organizations. And then making the advisory council meeting public or posting the meetings, and also making sure that those meetings are held in an accessible manner. And some of these bullet points were developed in 2019 prior to COVID. And so virtual is not even listed here, but that certainly makes it more accessible to have people participate. And so I will stop the share and just see if anyone has any questions or comments about what I had to share. And it looks like there's 2 people. Am I supposed to let people in because I'm now the host?
You
So
can,
sorry.
Bambi.
So sorry for those people who have been waiting.
Oh, I just resent the link back out because people were having trouble getting in. So I resent it back out. So hopefully we'll have additional people join us. You can see we're starting to get a few more. So I was just kind of sending it out as a friendly reminder too. Sometimes people get caught up in things. So, but I'd like to say, Bambi, it was very nice to watch the recording of it. I wasn't able to watch it in person, but just to hear it again as a supervisor, and hear the perspective of other stakeholders throughout the state, it was rewarding and it was good. And I just sent it to all of our supervisors of special ed in Lucia so that they will have it in the links to be able to go on and watch those webinars. And just so you guys know, those who are on the call, there are different links. So make sure that if you have an interest in something that's on there, you can click on it and get to those. So they individually zoomed pieces. So that's very nice. I'd love to get a copy of that document you shared.
Okay, yeah, I can send that out to. Actually, Sharon, if you remember in 2019 that we sent out a letter from GATA. That's really what it is. We updated it a little bit. I didn't show that part, basically with some of the new language of the new law. So I mean, I could send that out to you if you can get it out to all of the special ed directors. That would make it much easier for me.
We'll take care of that, Lynn.
Okay.
Hey, Bambi, this is Lynn in Ascension. And I got to watch the webinar too. I really appreciated the conversation that happened there and hearing the different ideas. I did have one question to see if you had any ideas or suggestions around kind of the struggle of open meeting forum and the formality of that when oftentimes it's, one of the few times that our parents of kids with disabilities have an opportunity to share ideas and things. Is there some way to come up with a balance? I hope my question makes sense, but open meeting restrictions seem kind of rigid at times as far as an open discussion amongst folks who aren't particularly members of the SEAC, but who are, attending and watching and listening.
And I'm not sure. I think that the way it's set up in law is that it has to be open meetings. And so no one that we've talked to has said, some of the people who were on the panel said that their meetings have been open and they haven't had much participation outside of the people who are members. The other point is that, as a parent, I've served on many boards that, open meetings, and like, that's just something that you have to know what is your comfort level of whatever you're putting out there, saying it, directly about yourself or about, your child, because I have to respect that, he's a young man now. So I think those are things that need to be shared with the members, and they also need to know that they are being selected because they should be representing the community as a whole. So like, maybe there's some training that could be done talking about, it's not an individual, this isn't an individual IEP meeting, that you have those. This is about a systemic, this is a systemic opportunity to be able to engage in how we can move the district forward.
Right. I'd like to chime in a little bit on that. The new or revised law does not state whether it's open or closed, but it can be either open or closed, just so you guys know. Many of our districts do. Mine is open, but some districts have chosen closed. I think like Orleans and maybe other districts have. But I think you're right, Bambi, about a way to express advocacy for students with disabilities or young adults with disabilities. And what we do in open meetings is exactly like what we did in SEEP in the state, and as well as BESI meetings, where we have blue cards where you can come and talk on a topic, as long as you get that agenda out 48 hours ahead of time, maybe put it on your website. All those things that we're required to do, that will assist them in choosing what to talk about. And then I always say, if you want to talk about something that's not on agenda, get with me. And if I can't get it on the agenda, we'll look at it in a future agenda. So that's kind of, I think it is fair. It is a way for, individuals to come and talk and get some information. It's not always a session that you can just complain about, it is a formal meeting at that point, but I agree. It's an avenue for students and adults with disabilities to get some information and be able to express their concerns and maybe make some differences and some changes within our local school districts.
And also, I've unfortunately, at some of the councils that I'm on, they have some policies where there's no personal attacks. Like, that's upfront, every meeting that's said at the beginning of the meeting, that will be shut down. And so I think given the nature of the emotion that some people will have in regards to these type of councils, that those things are discussed, and maybe there's some training in the first meeting talking about what are good ways to be able to express those issues. And let's just say, if there's an issue brought up, it may be, as many of you who are special ed directors, it may be an issue at a certain school. Like, you have policies around ways things should be done, and it might just be it's not being implemented in that certain school. So then you can say, let's have some private conversations if you realize it's not a systemic thing. The other thing is I think it would be really good practice to have a plan of what you want to accomplish at the beginning of the school year. So this just does not become just a support group meeting. You can find support group meetings in other ways, give them access to that. But this really is a body that's looking at improving practices and being very intentional in what you're trying to address.
And Bambi, that's a great point. I'll just chime in a little bit about ours and Arlene's. And something that we've done is we set up SEEK priorities at the beginning of every year with our members. And so we have chairs and co-chairs that then kind of lead that work in the different areas. And we've organized them around the legislation. So they're focusing on special education policy, procedures, resources, and then outreach to families in our community. And then I could just give an example of one of our projects during the pandemic was to make sure that we had a collective online resource for our families with all of the special education supports that exist in our city. And so we've made that available and made that public on our website. But that was a big project that our SEEK members took on. And so we really look at data, and we have conversations around, like, what are the challenges in our system? And then they take those on in these 4 areas and really push to improve outcomes for our students.
I think it's so interesting, and it really makes me excited about how well this document came together with input from folks on here, even some parents that we engaged around the content of this document. But all of the things that you all have talked about, Bambi mentioned the emotions that come along with these stakeholder groups, and so we kind of talk about that in the document. A couple of other key things that I hear you all saying are, some of the key purposes that we really tried to bring about in this document were around, the local SEEK is that's your ground zero. And the work that we do, that is our main body that's helping us as school system leaders and special education leaders drive change. Impact policy decision-making. So when I think about the key purposes that you all have talked about, and then I think we tried to capture in this document too, are around those decision-making. I heard a lot of you talking about transparency with the stakeholders and how to keep them involved early and regularly, and consistency. And then I think, you all talked about all of those unique perspectives. And when I look at the graphic on that document, those were the types of things that we were trying to really capture in this document. So this discussion makes me extremely happy. And I know we can give y'all some time before we hear a little bit more from our advisors and from panelists. But we can give y'all some time. So we did try to, I heard Bambi mention, having a self-advocate, having a high school student on the council who has a disability. And so some of those updates to law, that's what we were also trying to capture in here too, just as a really good, as we start the school year back, to give that update and change to the law. Bambi, I cannot thank you enough for joining us. I wasn't sure if she needed to hop as we move forward. But I just appreciate, and I thought all of that discussion that just happened, that wasn't fully planned, but really could not have happened better. So I really appreciate you joining us, Bambi, and feel free to stay, or I also understand if y'all need to go stuff some more school supply bags. So I truly appreciate you in the partnership.
And thank you. And at the beginning, when I had listed who was on the session, I forgot my dear friend in St. Charles Parish. They participated as well. So just wanted to acknowledge that. And Dr. Lockett, I saw you had unmuted yourself. I don't know if you had a question for me.
I was just going to say thank you so much for the information. It is indeed an honor to hear you say that. And even with your talking about how you represent from the governor's office and the impact that has happened on our schools, the plans and what we're doing, I think it's real significant. But as a tidbit of extra, I want to tell you how important your work is, because I'm dealing with that. My mother-in-law is disabled, and we've had to jump through hoops for CCW and get all those things changed. So now I'm learning a whole lot more, not only as a child, and which is my public, my trust, my career on that note, but on a personal level of how that work really flows and what that looks like. So thank you for what you are doing on a larger scale, especially what you do for K-12, but as well as what you're doing for our aging citizens, from officers, citizens, aging adults. So thank you so much for that. I want to make sure I let you know that, because it does help a lot to know you can find those resources. Many times when you're in K-12, we think about right now kid, but what happens when the child grows up? What happens when they're disabled, disability, and all of those resources that are out there? But approaching it from a perspective, from a personal level, has really gained a whole lot of ground for me, and reaching out to people with CCW and those facts, and to hear the governor's office really talking about that impact from there and looking at it. You talk on a local level about, you hear many people say, well, there's nothing in case for or supports for, Louisiana didn't make any ways for aging adults. Well, that's not true. That is not true. It's about knowing resources. And if I didn't have the background, this wonderful leadership team with Meredith Jordan and all of my Lucia sisters and brothers on the line, where I can reach out to, that have brought my knowledge to be able to address those needs and look for those resources and get what I need for my mother-in-law who has stage 4 cancer. So I appreciate all that you do. And of course, I appreciate all of my Lucia sisters and brothers as well. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you. And I'll put my contact information. Like you said, Dr. Lockett, I deal with things across the disability spectrum. And so, as we know, our lives are complex. So oftentimes it's not just about the students. Many of you deal with disability and other aspects, or people that you interact with are not just dealing with their child or their student with disabilities, they're dealing with it in some other capacity. So I'll be glad to share that information with you guys. And just as my final comment, I told you guys I was on the autism team back 15 years ago, and I'm sure at that time my son was, I didn't know what was going to happen with him, but right now he's at UL in the UL Life program and doing great. And so just to give that hope to those young families that are really struggling with the lifelong commitment to a child with significant disabilities, that what they're doing now and what you guys are doing is so important, and you can see significant changes through their school year. So just want to share that with you guys, and I will stop now and let you guys meet.
Thank you again.
And for those of you on a call, you can sign up for the newsletter from the Governor's Disabilities Office of Affairs. And that's how I kind of keep up with everything Bambi is working really hard to do, that and Facebook. But at the same time, I think it's important that, if you sign up, you go on and sign up, you can get that regularly. Sometimes it'll end up in your junk mail because sometimes it goes to mine for some reason. But if it's coming from the governor, I don't know why it's going to my junk mail. But anyway, I'm trying to correct that now as we speak. But there's just so much information. I did send that out to our membership at this point. So there will be a link there that you can hook on if you want to, get that on a regular basis, and you guys can keep up with Bambi and her team and all the great things they're doing.
Thanks again. I'm going to sign off.
All right. Thank you so much, Bambi. Really appreciate it. This, Meredith, just like you were saying, this conversation has already been phenomenal, and we didn't even plan it to be that way, but that's what happens when we get this good group together. So we do have, I would say, about 15-ish more minutes, and the plan was to really invite some more discussion around some questions, a couple that are specifically related to the advisory councils, just so those of you who may not be as familiar with them can hear some firsthand experience about the impact of those. But we've got some other questions as well, depending on what we have time for. So I would open up this, I guess, next section of our discussion by inviting our advisors on the call to share, just generally speaking, in what ways those advisory councils have impacted your district. And I'll leave it open-ended in that way so that you can share whatever's been most impactful to you.
I'll jump in. I know when the law first came out, I think we kind of took a timid approach here in my parish, and we really did start with kind of the bare minimums on the requirement for the committee. And of course, we went almost directly into pandemic times. And so we really struggled with participation and getting folks, new applicants to apply. But as we were coming out of the pandemic, we actually had a couple vocal parents with some really great ideas about how we could start to expand. And so we're still in process of making this a better and better resource for, collaboration with our families and communities out there. But we kind of trying to embrace this new law and take it wherever it can go for us. So we, went beyond the limits of the new law. We're up to 10 members. We've developed our on-site website because of the feedback from the parents. So we're trying to make that a more user-friendly, accessible place for parents to get information. We still have a long way to go there, but we are able to put that in place, and we're developing other resources that I think will be really helpful to families as they come in. And now we're a lot more 360 with feedback surveys at all of our meetings and feedback surveys to our teachers and our paras, so that we kind of all are working together to try to improve things here in Ascension. So, overall, we started small, and it seems to be getting some traction. So I'm excited about that. We doubled our number of applicants and our attendance online. We actually got up to 50 participants at one point, which was pretty amazing. So we're just hoping for good things to come from this and trying to embrace it as best we can.
Well, one of the things we've done in Caddo is, and we know COVID did catch all of us in a very different situation as workspace, rather, when we were trying to develop our teams, but we've worked hard at really gathering people who were interested in being a part of that process. My administrative team is normally there. Sometimes we have some parents. With such a large, unique district, we have compliance specialists that help support schools, and we're all over the place going to schools and just providing what's necessary for our families to feel secure. And it's proven in the data. So our superintendent, asked the question just the other day, said, Dr. Lockett, what are you all doing? Because our regulate numbers are dropping, all right? And parents are not going to regulate, parents are not going to private charter, that we've had the census data. We're looking at all these great things to see where they're going, but my special ed numbers are stabilized. So we're not losing a whole lot of special ed families. And I said, well, we're focusing and we're building teams around how do we approach our families? What are we communicating? And making sure we're keeping that focus on education in the right direction. And that's a significant part of the work. When you have those positive outcomes, when parents have those concerns, addressing those current concerns, meeting with those principals to help them think differently. Because in most cases, most principals don't have that special ed background and knowledge to make those decisions, yet they're trying to make decisions, not realizing there are laws and legalities that we have to work by to make sure that we're doing what we need to do. Just left a meeting, that's why I was just a couple of minutes late there with my own boss and my colleagues on my level, and that was one of the things that came up. And I quickly tell them, and I know that you all know, because we're all colleagues and people online dealing with the work. When you look at the span of what you touch in all your special ed teachers, your paras, PD specialists, your itinerant staff. I'm looking at about 1,200, a little over 1,200 employees that I do not have direct supervision of. I touch them because they're special ed, allotment of positions and resources and support. But when you look at that work, making sure that communication, that there is open communication about the work, what you're refocusing our intent is to support and make sure that kids get a free and appropriate public education, focusing on the laws that are critical to what's available and not just excluding special ed, a small population. So I think that's essential in the work when you start talking about the advisory council and bringing that to play and having those deep dive conversations about their work and what is expected of their work. And that's it.
Wow. I love you, Sheila Locken, and I can't stand that I got to follow up to you because I can't measure up, but I'm going to try. All right. So one of the things that we have spoken about and discussed a lot here in my district in St. Bernard is to actually take that SEEK and expand even further. So yes, we're required to meet a SEEK, whatever acronym you used. And there are some specifics, like how many times you have to meet, things like that, and who has to meet. But sometimes I feel like that's just not enough. So what we're going to try to do here in St. Bernard is to rekindle and reintroduce something we had prior to Katrina, which was a core team as well. So we're going to look at possibly bringing in additional stakeholders other than SEEK, and take a look at some of our transition needs for elementary, middle, and high school and adulthood, and making sure that we have some of those players talking with my team here so that we can have those resources ready to go for those kids in specific areas. Initially, prior to Katrina, we did a lot of work around transition, supported employment, supported living, having OCDD, Methodist, all of these players coming once a month to the table. I kind of want to rekindle that, but expand it into what are some additional services that we can provide for our kiddos in elementary or middle or high, so that we are not faced with at the end, are you on a waiting list, or have you gotten these services? So I think we're going to try to get that ball rolling. One of the things that I'm going to start with is families helping families, and talking with that stakeholder to say, hey, Nicole Williams, I already have her as my contact. I said, Nicole, I want to set up a meeting with you to discuss how can you help me with our parents specifically. Let's start with that population first, get some information out, and get the up-to-date resources, as Sheila was saying. That's important because that changes. People are shutting down. They're going to be virtual. I mean, those are some things that families are struggling with. They're calling a phone number, nobody's answering, they just give up, that kind of stuff. And they're really, really leaning on us as school systems to bring them back together. As Sheila said, their troubles won't go away. They become just adult troubles or even elderly troubles. So I think equipping our families even early with Lassard is, my best friend, Julie Riley, and her team is incredible. She's done enormous amount of activities here in St. Bernard as well as other districts. And then she's realistic. I mean, having those relationships with families and having that team be able to also help with other opportunities and resources out there. Nobody's saying no to anybody. It's just everybody's kind of running with their heads cut off. So I think it's the more we can equip people with the knowledge they need and set them up with who they can connect with, that's what stakeholders is all about. We talk about that all the time, is that connection. That's something Lucia, it prides itself in, and that we do every day, is to help each other out. Our sisters and brothers, as Sheila would call it. on a daily basis. So, that's just something I want to expand here in our district. And so I hope that maybe that might be something that you could do as well in your district, if that's something that is a need.
Okay. I have another question if we're ready to move on to another question, and hopefully this will just sort of tag on to the discussion we've been having already, but this is a little bit more specific to, we've been hearing a lot about making sure that we have sort of all the different groups of stakeholders involved and engaged and things like that. And my question is more about how do you ensure that that happens? And especially then, how do you ensure that you're not only hearing from quote unquote the squeakiest wheels, regardless of what group of stakeholders they come from? So anyone really on the call here who would like to share what you do to be intentional about making sure that you're hearing from those quiet voices or those voices that don't show up at all and not just the squeaky ones.
Well, one of the things we do in Caddo is that we collaborate a whole lot. So on our C committee, one of our parents is also an employee, very involved. We're expanding the resources that he does over our ROTC program to include other students with disabilities, more of our low functioning kids who are able. And we're just making sure that we're making those connections and having that positive communication throughout the community. I think that's essential to having just not the squeaky wheel, but what about the good things that's happening? And that's hard to do at such a large district. A large district, we always have a lot more concerns. The larger you are, the more problems you have. But how do you do that? Putting that information on the website. I think that's something Shayla said earlier, reaching out, developing those core teams, discussing and talking about, and then having an open door policy as a SPED leader. I think that's the most important. When people know they can call on you morning, noon, and night, because while administrators, so your phone really truly never cuts off about anything, and have those conversations about what can I do for my kid? What can I do differently? Can you help me? And whether it's my wheelhouse or not, finding the right resources and making those connections really help quietens the squeakiest wheel there, just complaining about my this, my that, my child, my resources. But what about how are we looking at it systemically? And then what can we do? So taking it to heart, listening to what the concern is, but also addressing that concern from a bigger picture. If this is what works here, how can we expand it? Now we know we have, I know here, suburban, urban, inner city, we have magnet, we have rural areas. So all of those are combined with this 1,000-mile radius in which I have the pleasure of presiding and supporting. But in that, how can we apply here what we do here and make sure that the vision looks, while the implementation of the facts and legislation is the same, applying it to meet the needs of the population in which your kids are being served in. And that's essential in that. So having those conversations with those principals and talk about how to think differently. One thing about our itinerant staff, and I told this to them yesterday, we're blessed because we know that if I went to Ura Drive, my Hatton conversation will be based upon this population of kids, the strength and the content knowledge of the leader there. And that conversation may be totally different than if I went to a CMCTS based on the population of kids that are serving, the leadership and the challenges, the good and the bad and the ugly at all schools. So you have to put on another hat when itinerant goes from one school to another one and realize the people you are talking to and be able to articulate, show, observe, and present that information in a way where you can get the same results, just different measurements on how deep you have to go into making sure it's happening. So that's essential in quieting that squeak as well. And that really helps support them in their work when you're open door to everybody.
Hey guys, can you hear me? I'm on my phone.
We can hear you, Roxanne.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to share that sometimes when we think about the squeakiest group, we sometimes forget about the group that don't have access to technology. I know I was so technology driven and I depended on technology to get a lot of my information out, but somebody brought it to my attention that not all of our parents have that access to technology as some of them do. So I think keeping in mind that when we think about equity for kids, we have to think about equity for families as well. all families do not have the same access to different modes of communication. So it's very important that we wrap our brains around that, and we try to reach out to those families, because those are usually the families that we never hear from. Those are the families that are hardest to get to IEP meetings. Those are the families that when we tried to use the digital signing tool to get IEP signed, they still couldn't access it because they didn't have the technology piece. So creating a system or coming up with an idea that you can ensure that all families are connected and that all families always know what's going on, I think is critical in this space when we're talking about stakeholders. Because while they may not be the ones that speak the loudest, sometimes they do have the greatest needs and they don't know how to access us or any of the other resources that are available to them. So we need to make sure that we consider them as important stakeholders as well.
She's absolutely right. One thing I think about when not so much squeaky wheel, but just to include all wheels, is when we take a look at our strategic plan, and I just kind of pulled it out to kind of reference it a little bit, but in St. Bernard, we have a strategic plan and we have 4 goals, and a lot of this is aligned with the State Department. Okay, so everything sort of falls in place as what the State Department's goals are as well. And we take a look at including our community, and having those community connections is very important, but to have more of a pinpointed, intentional way to include stakeholders is very important. In special education, it's not just about what services are out there or what we can get for the kids, but it also has to tie back into the entire focus of the entire district and the district's mission. So, you know, looking at like teaching and learning and assessments, how does that affect our kids with disabilities, and what stakeholders are out there that we need to be engaging to get that information from and get that input from them and get that information output to them. Another thing might be like recruitment and professional development. Those are some things that they want to know. What are we doing to improve our state, to improve our staff when it comes to, you know, reaching goals and improving outcomes for students. Another thing might be finances. How many times are we're having to lean on other stakeholders for some maybe support with money or projects or, you know, resources that we can afford that we are not allowed or that may not even be allowable in our IDA expenses. And then lastly, having that positive image in a community is very important when it comes to students with disabilities and adults and things like that. But having that community connection to me is very important. Getting out there, talking to, you know, stakeholders like the Kiwanis Club or, you know, whatever kids, whatever, you know, teens, for whatever it happens to be, whether it's Valero, getting donations through those types of stakeholders. Those are some things that you need to be the face of our kids and the face of our families and have that positive impact in the community. That is to me, a way to address every wheel, not just a squeaky wheel and not just a quiet wheel, but all wheels. So that's just kind of some things that we're doing in St. Bernard. Just wanted to share that with the team.
Thanks, Jeremy. I think that's really important. I love that, you know, we started off kind of pointing out the squeaky wheel, but then we talk about what about the wheels that don't make any noise because they don't have the technology. That's a really critical, I think, subgroup of stakeholders, right? So I'm really glad, Roxanne, that you pointed that out. And every wheel in between, that's really what today has been about, right? That we don't just sort of go along with what we've always done with stakeholders. Yeah, we need to make sure we talk to parents and the school board and we're good to go. You know, we got to get everybody on board with what we're doing here. So I hope you found this discussion today to be at least a helpful sort of jumping off point. I hope the guidance document is a helpful jumping off point for you. If I can, I'll try to get that added back into the chat one more time for those of you who joined us a little bit later. This webinar is being recorded, so either if you missed the beginning part or you know you have a colleague who would like to also listen in, be looking for that recording to come out. And lastly, I think I will put in the chat here a feedback form. This feedback form, I will say, is so important to us as we're developing these guidance documents and webinars, especially now that we're looking at, this was our last webinar for last school year, and we are gearing up to get a whole new year started. And we really want to make sure that the guidance documents and these webinars are as helpful as possible to all school leaders, especially when we're thinking about improving outcomes for students with disabilities. That's really why we're here in this particular gathering. And we want to make sure, though, that the information that we're providing you in these documents and webinars is as useful as possible to you in helping that happen. So one way that we can hear from you is by you filling out this feedback form. If you've had a chance to look at the document already, you will be able to fill out the feedback form about that, and give your thoughts on the guidance document. If you were only just able to listen into the webinar today, you're still able to give some feedback on that. If you'd like to maybe clip that link, copy that link and hold on to it after you've had a chance to look at the document, if you haven't had a chance, that would be great. We will take any and all feedback. And there is a spot on there for you to say, what other questions do you still have? Not only about engaging stakeholders, but also any questions that you have not heard addressed or answered throughout this past school year in these documents and webinars. Please feel free to list those on the feedback form today, because that will help inform the work that we do in this upcoming year. So thank you everyone for your time this afternoon. I know that we're at the end of summer / beginning of the school year. It's a busy time, but we appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks so much.
Ashley, I'm not sure if you're still on. I know you're muted, but if we could get maybe that recording shared with Meredith or Charlene, they can put it on the department's website. Because I did have a couple of people reach out and say, hey, I can't get on, or I'm busy right now, I can't get on, but I'm hoping that we can have a recording. It might just be easier if it's on the department's website, or if y'all want to send it to either myself or Denise Young, or anybody on on our guidance team, we can get that out to our Lucia members.
Okay. I think it started recording under Meredith's account. And
Okay.
so she'll have to,
Yes.
I can't even stop it right now. So she's going to get all this lovely post conversation.
Okay, good. So Meredith, put it on. I know she had to jump on another call.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
we'll definitely
guys.
make sure it gets out. Thank you so much.
Oh, no problem. Okay, I think we're done for today.
I think so.
Yep. Okay. All right. Bye, guys.
All right.
See you later.
Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.